Yeah, the city is really dirty.
Well, yeah, but the people moving here are from countries that frankly don't have the same values that we do.
Have you ever been in a situation like that where someone surprises you by quoting a reason for something that you were not expecting, and you know where that view is coming from and you don't agree with it? It's so tempting in those moments to go into lecture mode and start like flailing around explaining all the reasons why their reasoning is wrong. But let's be honest, does that ever really work? And even if you make your point very eloquently, will it truly lead the other person to think more critically? Probably not. In this video, I'm going to share with you what will. I'm going to share with you one question that's easy to remember and really effective in these situations. Hi, my name is Maureen. I've been a dialogue facilitator for over 10 years, and in this video, I'm going to help you get unstuck in this kind of conversation. And if you like this video and you want to dive deeper into these techniques, I've created a 5-step guide that you can download, which I'll tell you more about at the end of the video. So I want to tell you a quick story about something that happened to me last week on the subway. I was sitting down next to a dad and his daughter, who was maybe about 12 years old. At one point, there was a man who came begging for money. It looked like he was living on the street, and this man was also on crutches and missing a limb. I'm sorry about the construction noise. As he's going by, most passengers are like not acknowledging him. And then the girl looks up at her dad and she goes, "He's faking." I was shocked. I mean, I knew some people said that, but I guess I hadn't heard someone say it out loud for a long time. And it felt quite unexpected coming from this kid, even though I remember hearing and wondering about things like that when I was her age. The dad was also clearly taken aback. And he went right into lecture mode. He was like, "I can't believe you would say something like that. I feel like I've really failed as a parent. You've always had what you need and you haven't walked a mile in this man's shoes and you have no idea what is causing him to be in the situation." Anyway, he tells her he never wants to hear something like that come out of her mouth again. It was very clear he was not responsible for having taught her these values. So on the one hand, I was internally cheering a little bit because I was like, yes, that's the right sentiment. It is absurd to say somebody like that is faking. But after thinking about this more, and I thought about it a lot after I saw it unfolding, I think there were better ways he could have reacted. And I think there are ways that would have been more effective at helping the girl think for herself. And I don't know if, maybe she was angry because she was like, "I heard this at school and I know that he's faking," or maybe she was just like, felt some humiliation for having said something like that. But it was clear from what I saw at that moment, at least, that the father and the daughter felt disconnected. And I'm not saying this to put the dad on blast. I mean, God knows there are certainly worse ways that he could have responded, like by agreeing with her, for example. But I wish at that time I could have suggested to him to ask this question instead. After pausing to take a breath, he could have said something like, "Well, that might be the case, but what are some of the other reasons that exist for why he might be out here begging for money?" And that simple question would have allowed this kid to think of some of those explanations herself. I think she would have started to contemplate other reasons for homelessness that are more systemic, that are based on his life circumstances, and that exist beyond her own experience. And I think that in citing those, in contemplating them and talking them through with her dad, she would have changed her own mind, or at the very least nuanced her views, because she's probably just trying out a view that she hasn't quite had the time to think through. And I think that with a little nudge, she would have started to poke holes in that theory herself. So the research is so clear on this. People rarely change their minds because they've been presented with facts and arguments. It's actually kind of depressing how rarely it works. Like, we're really not the rational thinkers that we think we are. And another thing is we actually really don't like to change our minds because we don't like to admit that we've been wrong. There's actually a phenomenon that speaks to this that's called belief change blindness. It's the idea that when people revise their beliefs, it doesn't only happen gradually, but it can happen unconsciously. Basically, to protect our ego, when we change our minds, we often don't realize that our perspective has shifted. And there's some good advice here for those who are in the business of persuasion. If you want to change someone's mind, do it in a way that they don't realize that their mind has changed. I think that's why debates rarely change people's minds, because No one likes to be a loser. No one likes to lose a debate and then cheerfully admit that they've changed their minds. And here's another fascinating piece of wisdom. It's that actively articulating alternate explanations helps people integrate new information with their existing belief, rather than triggering defensiveness. That means that if I talk through alternative explanations to my point of view, then I'm more likely to actually contemplate those explanations and be persuaded by them than if someone else just tells them to me. So by asking someone who you disagree with open-ended, curiosity-driven questions, you're creating the conditions for belief change. And the kind of belief change that sticks because they've actually explained it to themselves. They've engaged with the process of learning new things. So the big takeaway here is that when someone says something that you disagree with, instead of immediately countering what they're saying with facts and arguments, ask them to articulate, what else could be true? That's it, and then go from there. And often this leads to nuance. It might just be a small change in their perspective, or it might be a complete change in their thinking, but it came about authentically and without triggering the defensiveness that comes from being attacked with facts. And when you're not activated like that, you're actually in a much better headspace to contemplate alternative realities. So this strategy is actually step 3 in my 5-step guide that I've created to unlocking conversations where you feel stuck. And if you're interested, you should download this guide that walks you through all 5 steps. I've used this particular framework countless times, forwards and backwards, and I know how effective it can be. And I use elements from it basically every day. But yeah, this step 3 that in the guide is called Exploring the Wider Terrain is so useful. It's so simple, yet if you're in a heated moment and you haven't practiced this skill, it's really hard to remember. It's not the reaction that you're going to reach for reflexively. Let me tell you that. So that is it for this video. I hope that you found this helpful and that you feel empowered to use it in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye.